What is going on, guys? We are back here with a Dragonflight update video. Blizzard just announced some massive changes that are coming to the raid reward setup system, from group loot, master loot, BoEs, everything. So we're going to go through this Wowhead post and kind of, talk about my initial reaction to most of it. I've seen a little bit of things about it, but my initial reaction to it and kind of how I think it's going to affect the overall raiding community, how it's going to affect me and my guild personally, and how I think it's going to affect the Race the World first. Though, you're probably going to want to check out some other, actual people who compete in the Race the World first, and they'll let you know how they think it's going to impact it. But this article will be in the description below if you want to go read it yourself or go through it as you're watching this video. But yeah, let's start. Alright, to start, so we got the raid title here. It's pretty obvious exactly what they are targeting. It says Raid Rewards, Changes, and Experiments in Dragonflight Season 1. There's going to be no personal loot. There's going to be guaranteed BoEs from Lieutenant Trash. Two very enticing things that are coming with it. But we have a quick summary here, but we are not going to go through that. We're going to go through the entire thing. Hey everyone, we wanted to get out a sort of primer ahead of raid testing tomorrow to provide context for the sort of changes you will and won't see as you step into Dragonflight's first raid, Vault of the Incarnates. Before diving into what's different, this post is going to be entirely about raid. They say it's not about Mythic Plus or PvP, which will come at a later date. Without further ado, here's what's in for tomorrow. Group loot. While inside Vault of Incarnates, group loot will be the only method of loot distribution. There is no option to select for yourself or your group to return to personal loot. This is a massive change. Now, people have been talking about master loot, group loot, need before greed, personal loot, all of these things for a long time, and I made a video about it probably about a couple months ago, but Blizzard was like, you know what, we're bringing master loot back, kind of, but it's gonna be group loot, need or greed, everything like that. But the big thing is that there's gonna be absolutely no personal loot at all. Now that's a massive change. Now if you pug raids, you might think, oh well, now I'm never gonna get any of my pieces of gear because the leader is going to steal all of the gear. That's not how it's gonna work. It's going to be need or greed, right? If a person cannot use that piece of gear, they cannot select need. Therefore, only people hitting need will be people who can use that piece of gear. So obviously, people cannot troll and take gear they don't need. And if they're needing on gear that they don't need, well, that's kind of the only bad thing about it. They say that professional regents will stay personal loot, obviously. Need and greed UI will return, and we'll be monitoring feedback to make sure the rules around when and how players can roll on items be as intuitive as possible. Now, this is going to be the big question for me personally, is I'm pretty sure I remember back in like Cataclysm and Wrath, if you were like a plate wearer, you could technically need on things that were cloth, leather, and mail. Now, I don't think that that's going to be the case in Dragonflight. So, and it's the same with Hunter, right? Hunter could need on every single weapon because they could theoretically use every single weapon. The whole meme of Hunter weapon came out about that. But I don't think that's how it's going to be in Dragonflight. So if it is like that, make sure you are letting Blizzard know that that should not be how it is. We do not want Hunters needing on intellect staffs, or we don't want warriors needing on agility polearms and things like that. We just don't want that. Loot trading is the next topic. While inside a raid, all item level restrictions placed on trading between members of that group are removed entirely. Now, this is a massive change, specifically as a tank player. What runs into a lot of things is I will get a piece of gear that is not good for me at all. It either doesn't have verse, or it doesn't have the correct stats, or it's like a DPS trinket or something like that that, yeah, I may want in the future, but for progression-oriented players, you want the best people to have that gear, right? Now, this is massive because if I get a piece of gear that I don't think it's as big of an upgrade for me, I can actually trade this piece of gear to someone else that might need it more than me, or they might need it entirely over me. Like, I don't need it at all, but I looted it, or I looted it, so That's how it is. But when you combine this with group loot, what this means is that anyone can basically need on an item, and they can then theoretically just trade that to whoever it is. This means that even small item level increases that aren't upgrades, as is often the case with rings and necklaces, which are budgeted high in secondary stats, won't be locked to a player even in the case that they roll and win that item. Massive change. Massive change. Now you can gear up people that need the gear rather than gear going to waste 2-3 weeks into a tier. Item level tiering. There now exists a third item level tier at which items may drop up from 2. As you remember, the final 2 or 3 bosses of the raid, at least in Shadowlands, these bosses would drop higher item level gear, but now they're making it 3 tiers, right? So the first couple bosses will drop lower gear, and then the next couple bosses will drop a middle tier of gear, and then the final bosses will drop even higher of gear. I think this is pretty good. Here are the item levels here. We have 389, 395, and 398. So it looks like the final bosses, 2 bosses, and then... Oh, and then the end wing bosses will also drop it. And then every other boss will drop the same item level. This is great because generally the end wing bosses are harder. So if you are killing them, it should mean that you do get more higher item level gear. Now, that being said, there's not that big of a disparity between these two. It's 10 item levels, so it's not that great, but just the whole item level curve is going to be much greater now for people who are full clearing raids rather than people who are only killing the first couple bosses of a raid. So I think that may have some implications early on, but I don't think it'll be like too difficult. It won't impact the game too much. Unique drops. Additionally, we're experimenting a number of bosses that possesses one item that intentionally drops at a higher item level, usually plus 6 or 7 from the boss's normal table. To be clear, this isn't Titan Forging. It will be the same item level every time and will be very, very slightly rare to compensate some pending new tech. We'll have the ability to note this in the dungeon journal itself. These can be unique appearances, items with special bonus effects, or powerful trinkets that many people may seek after. Okay, I mean, that's kind of cool, but I don't really understand it, right? Because you're basically just intentionally making best in slot gear, right? Like, why even make other gear in the first place if you're just gonna make these have higher item levels and be special effects and everything like that? Like, if you have 2 rings on this boss and one of the rings is a higher item level with a special effect, like, no one's gonna want the other ring, right? So let's hope that's not how it is, and that it is, you know, these pieces of gear are just higher item level and they're a little bit better, but the other gear on that boss is still good, right? That's a good thing to know. For the moment, it's intended that not all 8 bosses possesses one, but that's something that could change in the future. Current examples are a pair of special rings. Okay, so they probably have like a cool effect. Some Omni trinkets, stats trinkets. No one calls these Omni trinkets. From the Primal Council, they get stronger with more copies. Okay, cool. And a special bow from the Storm Incarnate herself. It's not like Hunters haven't had a special bow in the last expansion. Let's give them another reason for people to play Hunter. Great. Bind on equip items. Let's see. Regular non-boss enemies within raids will no longer have a chance to drop bind on equip epic items. Instead, lieutenant enemies named mini bosses throughout the raid will have a chance to drop them instead. These would work like lieutenants do in current WoW, where you're only eligible to receive loot from them once per week per difficulty. Okay. BoEs would become scaled with group size like regular bosses do. This would generate a set number of BoEs each raid per group, assuming a full clear of the instance. Lastly, we'd be placing more important items in the BoE pool. This could be anything from weapons to higher item level pieces to make them worthwhile to raiders. Now, this does a couple things, I think. So this is a very interesting change that I think directly targets people who spam raids all day to farm gold, right? Now, no, you will have to have multiple characters to farm raids for BoEs, but also the fact that you're guaranteed these BoE items, right? I remember you could clear an entire raid. My guild has done it many times where you clear an entire raid and you don't get a BoE at all, right? And now it's looking like if you have a 20-man group, you're gonna get like 3 to 4 BoEs per raid. That's crazy, right? So that's just more gear that you can target towards some of your players, or you can throw up on the auction house, things like that. I also think this will most likely reduce the price of BoEs, which will be very good for people that are just coming into the game, or they're re-rolling on alts and things like that. You can just buy a piece of gear that's like best in slot. I think that would be really good. And the fact the weapons are going, like weapons could be on there, or trinkets, or whatever could be in the BoE slots. That's a great sign. I think this is an interesting thing to do. Will it be good? I don't know. We'll have to see. But from the base thing, I think it's gonna be a great thing. Now, there's one issue with it, and it's not gonna impact me because I'm not a race to world first raider. But we are now going to watch these world first guilds farm BoEs. They're gonna have 12 bucket characters that they log into each raid tier, like first week, second week, and they're gonna run through the raid on 12 characters and kill them and get these BoEs that they can then trade off to their mains. Now that only impacts a 0.1% of the player base, maybe even less than that. It affects maybe 100 players in total, but it's going to happen. So we'll have to see how they react to this kind of change. But I also think it will reduce the price of BoEs, so they won't be spending as much gold as we did see the last couple raid tiers. They spent millions and millions of gold just to get people into their raid to loot them things. So overall, these changes are really good for both the high-end community and the low-end community, in my opinion. We will have to see how they go. If you have beta, make sure you log on to beta, you test it out, you let Blizzard know how it's going. I'll be doing it myself, and we'll go from there. But yeah, hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Make sure you go check out this on Wowhead. It'll be in the description below. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, share the video with a friend, do all that great stuff. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.